This disclaimer was copied without permission.
Oh, fancy that. Someone is wrong on the internet. Well, guess I have to chip in then. Cheers, Clovis Scotland's Wiggles and all other good people out there. Housewatch here. And I am going to make a quick off-the-cuff video about a question that seems to have gained some traction on Twitter lately. Probably also on YouTube and on social media in general. And I did mention this before. I actually have a degree in sociology of religion from the University of Copenhagen, and so to this subject, I think I'm actually capable to chip in with my 2 cents. I would actually have something to say on this, which is not just based on my opinion, but also a wee bit of knowledge that I actually picked up during my time in university. So the question is, this obviously debated heavily at the time, is whether religion is a mental illness. Religious people believe in many things that for ordinary people, including myself, can seem silly. We have beliefs in fantasy creatures, gods, demons, angels, heaven and hell, magic, the efficacy of prayer, that it actually works, that it actually does something, and maybe most prominently, that's the most prominent thing that I can think of right now, would be speaking to God. You hear religious people say that they in some way communicate with God. Some would even say that they are listening to God's voice, and I understand why people would find that a bit disturbing and indeed well, if not insane, then at least a bit askew. It would to some extent fit a common sense opinion on what is a mental illness. Now, personally, and you might already have figured this out, this is not at all my opinion. Even though I am openly an atheist and would be happy to be able to just wave religious beliefs off with it being a mental illness, I can't, because I simply believe, I'm quite convinced actually. I think there's very good evidence that it isn't. Religion is not a mental illness, and frankly, I find it a lazy excuse. Actually, it's a lazy excuse to wave something that you don't like off as a mental illness. It's a cheap way of trying to explain away a phenomenon that is very significant in a society and simply as humans. So why is it not a mental illness? Why don't I see it as a mental illness? And there's a number of reasons for that. I've thought about 2 important reasons why you shouldn't see religion as a mental illness. 2 reasons why it's not. So the first one is one founded in the science of religion, and quite specifically the one that I was studying, sociology of religion. And if you go back to the 2, as it is, godfathers of sociology of religion, which are Emile Durkheim and Max Weber, the former is from France, the latter is from Germany. They are seen as, in many ways, contrasts of each other. Durkheim was in the French school of positivism after Auguste Comte, while Weber was much more of had much more of a hermeneutical approach to the subject of sociology. One thing, however, they did agree upon was that religion was a social phenomenon. It's a social phenomenon, and as such, it cannot be a mental illness. You see mental illnesses, well, you see actually any illness in individuals. You don't see it as something that infects a society. Well, of course, you can see some illnesses affecting society. So when we talk about epidemiology, but it's still individuals contaminating each other physically with something that you can actually put under a microscope and look at. This is what causes actual physical illnesses. Some might say that religion does the same, only with groups of people. However, the thing is, if you isolate people with mental or physical illnesses, if you take them away from the group, they still have the illness. It doesn't change necessarily. It doesn't change much from that. With religion, it's different. If you take the individual out of a group, out of a specific religious group, that individual will no longer be able to practice their religion as they did before. Religion is a collection of social practices, not only beliefs but also very much practices. Everyone knows the practice of prayer. Religions are built up around rituals. They are built up around holidays. This is what separates a religion from an illness. Generally, it's a social construct, and it's based in societies. It's not something that one person has. It's a shared set of beliefs. It's a shared set of ideas, and very importantly, a shared set of practices. Basically, the reason why you can't see collective social practices as a disease is that if you really want to see social practices, rituals, holidays, you really need to change the definition of what a disease is very, very much to make that fit, and it will be stretched so much that the idea of a disease and what that is doesn't have any explanatory power anymore. That means you could fit political opinions in with as a mental disease as well, if you want to do that. The reason why many people see religion as a mental illness is that people do believe in absurd things, and what I'm coming at here is that the phenomenon of religion is intrinsically social. A lot of people think that because people claim to be communicating with God or maybe with angels, and they would see angels and stuff like that. Now, people jump to the conclusion that people are hallucinating. However, this is rarely the case. Humans are made with strong imaginations, and basically, in my opinion, what people do, what religious people do when they claim to be communicating with magical creatures, be they gods, demons, angels, whatever, is that the ideas and thoughts that people are getting spontaneously, these very religious people, because they have their religious beliefs, interpret these ideas, these spontaneous thoughts, as coming from God, instead of what I would do as an atheist, or just as a regular person. I would guess that those ideas and thoughts came from, well, myself, basically, somehow. I can't explain that in any more detail for myself, but people who are very deeply religious will sometimes claim that it comes from God for some reason. If they have good and happy thoughts that are in concordance with what they otherwise believe, they will say that the thoughts come from God. If they get spontaneous thoughts that they don't like, that are in their view sinful, stuff like that, they will attribute those thoughts and ideas to Satan. That is also why in the minds of these people, God so very often deeply agrees with them. It's just an extension, really, of their own self. That doesn't make these people insane. It just gives them a special kind of confirmation bias that may be a pain in the ass to witness. It doesn't make them insane. So I've been around the socialist aspect of religion and why it's not a mental illness. There's another aspect that is not so much a part of me as a sociologist of religion, but it's an opinion that I have due to a job I used to have. I was interviewing physicians about their prescribing habits. I was doing a number of studies in psychiatry. I would be questioning psychiatrists a lot. And they were thinking of concrete patients that they were prescribing drugs to. And I would ask them what the symptoms of these people were, and they would describe them very generally. If they were psychotic, had hallucinations, if they were paranoid, or if they were megalomanic. And very rarely something like religion would come up. I think it was only, out of the hundreds of interviews I made, I think there was only one physician once that said that a person had religious delusions, which didn't mean that this person was delusional because he or she was religious. It was more like bizarre religious ideas happened to be part of this person's illness history. If you look at mental illnesses, usually the way that you would diagnose someone as mentally ill is looking at their illness history. You can't take blood tests, and you can't prop mentally ill people up with instruments to see if they are mentally ill or not. You have to use other methods. There is, however, also another method, which is, if you have a suspicion that someone is psychotic, for example, you can try giving them antipsychotic medication and see if they respond to it. And if they respond to it, your conclusion would be that yes, they were to some degree psychotic. Now, ask yourself this question. If you find someone deeply religious who really believes in some relatively bizarre religious stuff, they believe that they communicate with God, they see angels, and you would give them a psychiatric drug, do you really think they would stop believing in that? And in some rare cases, I think, yeah, they would respond, and they would probably not speak to God or see the angels as much. However, in many other cases, there would be no other reaction to the medication than the side effects. They would, however, still be talking to God. They would start talking about how God was agreeing with them that you would be a really shitty person to give them psychiatric drugs for their religious belief. And you would also probably feed into some kind of oppression narrative that they might have. In any way, it's not so simple. Religion, even in many extreme cases, does not fit into the models we have of mental illnesses. They don't fit the definitions and the methods that we would use to find out whether people were mentally ill. So much more the treatments. would simply do nothing to these people. That would all do more harm than good, I'm sure. So that's my 2 cents. I hope it was to some use. It's an interesting question, and again, I understand why people could. I mean, if you have been around deeply religious people and you get annoyed with them and you think that they are saying bizarre stuff all the time, it's completely understandable why you would believe that they are some kind of deranged or deluded. However, it's not supportive in the fight against religious extremism or fundamentalism to call these people deluded when, quite objectively, our religious belief, however extreme it might seem, rarely fits the bill when it comes to mental diseases. Religions are social constructs. They are not individual the way any disease is, and you can't treat religion with psychiatric drugs. Yeah, and that'll be all for this time. So like and subscribe, comment, please comment, because it's a good discussion and I like participating in it. Also, do share if you think this was worth sharing. I've got an email. You can contact me if you want to send me stuff, beers to review, t-shirt to wear, whatever. Things to put up on the empty walls, which are always behind me. And apart from that, always remember to drink responsibly. And until next time, finished it this time. Cheers anyway.